Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, bright and early, as we consciously gather to collectively acknowledge the importance of mental well-being today on Bell Let's Talk Day. My name is Christina Fox, and I'm the CEO of Tech Alliance. As the Regional Innovation Center for Southwestern Ontario, Tech Alliance is committed to people who have big hopes, big dreams, and see big opportunities. We are the place for the dreamers, the innovators, and world-changing ideas. We empower world-class ventures and fuel growth in Canada's innovation economy, and we do this collaboratively by championing, coaching, and amplifying businesses while fostering a vibrant technology community of innovators. We do all of this with you in mind. So before we get started, let me share a few key points. Everyone is muted on today's webcast, on today's masterclass. Please feel free to add any question at any point using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Today's masterclass will be recorded and available after the webcast. And if you'd like to receive an email newsletter worth opening, sign up for ours. The link will be dropped in the chat bar. As we approach the 1-year mark since this global pandemic became a part of our daily lives, the personal, social, and societal impacts are undeniable. While we work to innovate, forge new ventures, and create inclusive and supportive work environments, stress, work, fatigue, and mental health are all factors that require time, attention, and acknowledgement. Today on Bell Let's Talk Day, we will explore how to avoid burnout and develop resiliency. Leading our learnings and opening a much needed conversations is one of our favorite client companies, led by Morgan Rosenberg, the founder and CEO of Resili, a mental health organization making mental strength accessible through its free Resili App, its Resili Report, and Resili Workshops for employers. Morgan is a leader in mental health innovation through his roles as CEO of Resili, Global Mental Health Lecturer at the Schulich School of Medicine, Innovation Fellow at Toronto General Hospital, and the COO of Global Minds Collective, not-for-profit. He is passionate about democratizing access to mental strength and mental health across demographics, cultures, and social landscapes. Outside of his mental health work, he is an avid foodie and a cook. He's a fitness enthusiast and a traveler. Boy, oh boy, wouldn't we like to be thinking about traveling right now? So at Tech Alliance, we have a common belief between our board, our staff, our entrepreneurs and residents, and our entire technology community that in pursuit of creating spaces where innovation thrives, we need to focus on what matters. Today, more than ever, let's talk about mental health. Over to you, Morgan.
Thanks, Christina, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you talking about mental health and just diving into resilience. I think resilience has taken on a new meaning over the past year. It's tried a lot of us, but it's also taught us new ways to be resilient as well as to fuel that resiliency. So that's what we're going to talk about a lot more today. When I talk about resilience, really what I like to think about is tips and tricks for mental health. We're going to get more into this in a second, but when we talk about mental health, it's really distinct from what we often think about as mental health. We often kind of lump mental health and illness in one big clump. So we're going to demystify that a little bit, and then I'm going to give you some tips to keep your mental strength top notch. So Christina already did a great job explaining my background and some of what I do. So I'm going to blaze right through this slide, but this is just to say, not only do I care deeply about what we're talking about today, and I'm so grateful to share it with all of you, but I've been around the block a few times in a few different parts of the world. She already covered this as well, but for anyone on the call who's interested in learning more about what we do at Resili, we support both employees individually through tailored customized action plans as well as employers through real insights. But the most important thing, and the thing I'm most proudest of my team for, who's on the call today, is that all of our solutions look like they're made by designers because they are, and function like they're made by designers, but are backed by leading science. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit of that with you today. And if you want to learn more, you can of course reach out to me personally or download the Resili app as well. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to split this up into two parts. The first thing we're going to do is talk a little bit more about mental health. We're going to do a few interactive exercises and workshop pieces, and then I'm going to give you some quick tips for maintaining your mental well-being during COVID. The second half of the workshop, we're going to dive into a few of my favorite tailored skills to cope with when you're having a bad day. So, to start, I want to ask everyone, how are you doing? It's Bell Let's Talk Day. let's talk. If everyone can type into the chat just one word to describe how they're feeling, what they're bringing into this session today. Tired. Those days when you wake up and it's still yesterday. What else? Hopeful, energized, accomplished, curious, low, lonely. So it sounds like we really have a collection of emotions that we're bringing into this room today, which is really representative of what it means to be human. And so thank you everyone for sharing, observing. I love that because it flows right into the next part of what we're going to be doing. No matter whether you're coming in low energy or high, whether you're feeling depleted or totally enthused and ready to take on the world, a great check-in to feel that a little bit deeper and then figure out what to do with it is to embrace in mindfulness. Now, mindfulness can mean many things. I'm sure we've all heard the word and are caught up in the craze or sick of the craze. But mindfulness is much more than just meditation. Mindfulness is simply paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. Paying attention to the present moment on purpose, so deliberately, like I have chosen to do this, and without any judgment. No good, no bad, no ugly, no stressful, just it is. An easy way to do that, or a simple way I should say to do that, is through meditation, which is why it's become so popular. But it can also be really simple things like going for a walk and noticing the colors of the trees and the sounds outside of you, and saving that space to only notice what's immediately around you. It can be feeling the texture and the temperature of the water when you're in the shower and hearing the drops of water hit on the ground and just saving 30 seconds to do that in your shower. So mindfulness is really just about paying attention. To give everyone a bit of a taste of mindfulness, though, I'm going to introduce you to one of my favorite meditation practices, which you can find online as well on SoundCloud and YouTube, called Tuza. This is something that I'm taking from my work at Global Minds Collective. It was originally developed, I believe, in a Rwandan context, and the word Tuza loosely translates to like hang loose, that feeling of connection to each other, but also that feeling of calm and peace. And so it'll take about 3 minutes. You can do it with your eyes opened or closed, but I'm going to invite you all to try it out with me. Usually, if you're going to facilitate something like this with your teams, if you're a leader or an HR professional, I remind everyone that you can keep your cameras on or off, mute or unmute, give people the space to feel however they want to feel. Obviously, you all already have that covered with Christina keeping everyone on webinar mode, so we're going to dive right into it. If you're not already sitting down, get seated in a comfortable position. Allow the soles of your feet to connect with the floor. Rest your hands on your thighs, and allow your shoulders to drop. At this point, you can gently close your eyes, or allow your gaze to focus on a reference point in the room that you can return them to if they begin to wander. Now just let your spine grow tall and noble, like the trunk of a tall tree. And take a moment just to notice how your body feels. How are you doing today? Now bring your attention to the flow of your breath. You don't need to breathe in any special way. Your body knows how to breathe. Simply notice each breath coming into the body with an inhale and leaving the body with an exhale. If you notice your mind is caught up in thoughts, concerns, emotions, or body sensations, know that this is normal. Simply notice what is distracting you and gently let it go by redirecting your attention back to the breath. each in-breath to be a new beginning, and each out-breath to be a letting go. We'll continue to pay attention to our breath in this way for just a few more moments. And then when you're ready, slowly bring your attention back to the room. Open your eyes and let how you feel now guide you. We'll give everyone a second just to come back into the room before we get into my favorite topic around mental health and mental illness, and it's this slide right here. So this slide is a summary of what I believe to be the best way to understand mental health and mental illness. Here on Bell Let's Talk Day, the conversation started when this initiative first launched, really around talking about mental illness, which was important and still is, because stigma is still a big challenge to accessing treatment, both here in Canada and abroad. However, one thing that I've noticed change about the conversation recently was also talking about mental health or mental well-being. We use a lot of different words to describe the same phenomenon that you see on the vertical y-axis. Mental health, mental strength, mental well-being, and a lot of the time these words mean the same thing. It means the day-to-day health and well-being of our mind, regardless of whether we have mental illness or not. What's so powerful about this chart is we all exist somewhere on that well-being axis. Some days we wake up and we're feeling depleted or tired or lonely or stressed, and our mental health is probably a little bit lower. We feel a little off. Doesn't mean we have a diagnosed mental illness. It doesn't mean that we need to see a psychiatrist or get treatment. The same way that, when you wake up and your muscle's a little sore, you don't need to go to the family doctor, but you do need to care for it, and you need to know how. And so regardless of where you stand on the mental illness spectrum, you could have a diagnosed mental illness like depression or even something more severe, oftentimes, like schizophrenia, and still have good mental health with the right treatment for your illness and the right behaviors and habits in your day. Similarly, for others on the call who don't have a diagnosed mental illness, you can also improve your mental health by doing the right things each day and each week. What's really cool about this model, though, it's called the model for mental flourishing. And who wouldn't want to be flourishing in their mental health? What's really cool about this model is it actually breaks it down. It tells us exactly what components of mental health exist and what we should be doing to keep them high. And so it tells us that there's three big categories of mental well-being. The first is our psychological well-being. This very broadly is our sense of meaning and purpose, our sense of connection in our day and our lives, our social well-being, which is our connection to our immediate close networks like our friends and families, our connections to our communities, and our connections to the world. And then our emotional well-being, which is how we feel day in, day out, week in, week out, and whether overall we more often feel good or we more often feel not so good and unpleasant emotions. So I was talking with Heather and Christina, and I was really struggling for what to do for this next part, because what I love to do is I love to actually get into the nitty-gritty of it with the audiences in the room. And when it's a workshop of like 20 people or even just like a company-wide workshop, we really kind of deconstruct this and get into specific examples from people in the audience. And we figured out how to do that today as well. So it's time for Choose Your Own Adventure. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you the mental flourishing quiz that we give to employees when we launch this in a company and launch our Resili Report in a company. So you're going to get to assess your mental health in real time. Sarah has just popped open the first part of our 3-part poll. And don't worry, it's completely anonymous, so I can't see what you personally responded. Christina can't see. If your boss is on the call or your colleague, they can't see. It's really just to get a sense and check in. And you can record these answers for yourself as well, because this is a great reflection tool. So the 3 things we're asking first are for emotional well-being. And the first one is, how often in the past month have you felt happy? Have you experienced happiness in your day? The next, how often have you felt interested in life? Like, oh man, yeah, like what I'm doing right now, I'm really passionate about or really excited by. And the last one is, how often have you felt satisfied? I'm good. I'm happy with where I am. I'm grateful for where I am right now, and I feel good about my situation. All right, I think we have about half of people having responded, so we'll give everyone another 30 seconds to get your answers in. This is really interesting. It looks like we've got some pretty close scores. And just to reiterate, there is no right answer to this. It's just a matter of how you're doing in this moment in time this month. And these will go up and down depending on what's going on in your life, and that's normal. So I'm going to end the polling, and we're going to share the results. And so if I'm putting on my investigator hat, I'm going to say that it looks like the thing that this audience kind of could most use a booster on is how to bring more happiness into their day and their week, which is good because it's one of my favorite activities. It's super simple and it's very energetic, but something that most of us just don't do enough or haven't actually taken the time to write down. So if everyone can grab their pencil and paper or open a Word document on their computer or on their phone, we're going to stop sharing these results and we're going to get back to the slides. So it's a race. Don't start yet, but we're going to write down the first 14 things. This is like brainstorming mode. Some of us are great at it and we come up with a million ideas just like that. Others of us may only get 4 or 5, and that's okay as well. Just keep adding to the list throughout your day. But we're going to race to see how quickly we can get the first 14 things that make you smile. It could be anything from a cup of coffee to a good TV show to a chat with a friend. Are you ready? Set. Go. Going to give everyone about a minute and a half. And if you're done early, you can type in 1 or 2 of your favorite things that make you smile in the chat. Maybe it'll inspire some other people as well. I love that the first 2 things that came up were both goofy animals and their videos. The other day, admittedly, I love these too, and I Googled goofy Bernedoodle oofs and got some great results. Smell of my puppy. Sunlight. Spending an hour with Morgan. I think that one was supposed to be just to me, but I read it anyways. Awesome. We'll give everyone just another couple seconds to wrap up their lists. Oh, and also just a note, I realized your default setting may be to send a message to just all panelists. If you change it to all panelists and attendees, then everyone can see together. Awesome. Congratulations. I saw it done, so we'll celebrate that with Diane. It is hard, and that's why I always like to start with this exercise. So research down in the States, they looked at comparing gratitude, which is a kind of tried and true tested form of positive psychology to increase your feelings of happiness. They compared gratitude practices and very specific and deliberate gratitude practices implemented and measured within their participant sample versus another group who was told to just do things that make them happy. Like, make a list, do at least one thing a day that makes you smile. And the results pretty conclusively said, and this was just one study, both are important, but the results conclusively said doing things that makes you happy has a greater positive effect on your emotional well-being than just practicing gratitude each night. So really important to have that list. So then even when you're feeling low or when you're feeling bored and unmotivated, you can go back to that list and say, okay, I'm going to do that one because that's easy. And I'm just going to push myself to do it. We're going to pop open the second poll now. Oh, I love that the results are still coming in. So again, same question. The past month, how often have you felt? And these are for your social well-being. And some of these may seem a little bit different than how we typically think of social well-being because it's our connection to our close friends, our community, and then the world. So in the past month, how often have you felt that you have something important to contribute to the world? That you belong to a community, a social group, friend circles, neighborhood, work. That our world is becoming a better place for all people, including people like me. That people are generally moral and good, and then finally that the way our society works makes sense to me. I may not have to agree with it, but I understand it. Like, I get how it works. These ones get a little harder sometimes. And so this whole framework that I'm showing you was developed about 20 years ago. Fun fact, the average time that it takes for a medical innovation to reach the front lines, according to some of the knowledge and research that I've done with the group here in Toronto, is about 18 years. And so, of course, this is just coming to the forefront now. But one of the things that made it really interesting and innovative was this piece here around social well-being, because we know that our social connectedness, our social well-being is core to our happiness, to our longevity in life, to our health. We've all heard stats like people who are in a healthy and committed relationship are like much more likely to like stay healthy and live longer. And of course, the inverse being true as well, that if you're in a toxic one, that's even worse. We know that people who have high social connection are happier as well. But this actually quantified it and gave us like tangible things to understand our social well-being across dimensions, not just like how many friends do I have on Facebook, or like how often do I connect with my close friends, which is a real one, but it's not a comprehensive measure. I see we have about 10 people outstanding, so I'm gonna be quiet and let everyone finish up their thoughts for just another couple seconds. All right, final seconds, get your votes in. All right, we're going to end the polling and we're going to share those results again. You guys make my job both so hard and so easy because it seems like we're split across the board. Like I said, we give kind of we do this at a much deeper level with our Resili Report for employers, and we also talk a lot more about this in the free Resili app. So if you want to dive into all of it, you're like, Morgan, do all of these different components, then please reach out because we definitely do have things that we can dive into. But it looks like for today, number 3, that our world is becoming a better place for all people, or most people actually, including people like me, seems to have the highest need, which makes sense given the fact that We have crazy world leaders or like leaders who just are not really jiving with us, although one less now, which is great. And a global pandemic, it's pretty hard to believe that the world is becoming a better place for most people. So I need to figure out how to use my slides and jump to the one that I want to show you all today. There it is. Social actualization. So this topic is something called social actualization, which is the belief that the world is or can be good for most people. Like, it's similar to self-actualization. Like, when we talk about self-actualization in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're talking about becoming our best self. So this is the same thing except for the world, because if I wake up in the world every day and I wake up and I think the world sucks, it's always going to suck, and I don't really have any faith that it's going to change, kind of puts a damper on really actively contributing to it and connecting in it and engaging in it. And so when you signed up for this session, I'm sure you didn't think that you were going to get a fluffy lecture on the power of hope. What I'm here to tell you today, though, is that hope is actually one of the most powerful and well-studied phenomenons when it comes to social actualization, when it comes to that belief in the future. And so as we stare down the barrel of these multiple global catastrophes, it's really easy to lose hope in the future of our society. However, the belief that our society is and will be worth participating in is, like I said, very core. And hope, unlike, I think oftentimes we associate hope with something like blind optimism, right? We kind of look and we say like, oh yeah, hope, that's just like some blind belief that the world is going to get better, even though there's so many bad things going on. It's naive, it's foolish. But hope is not blind optimism. Hope is the ongoing practice of envisioning, appreciating, and acting on the good things that could happen, regardless of their immediate likelihood. And that's my like Webster's definition. That's the one that you're going to get out of me for the day. But from this stems a lot of common phrases like, be the change that you want to see in the world. I mean, it's as much about changing our current reality and our current connection with the world as it is about doing our part to change the world. So part of acting as if you're in the world that you want to be in is really about changing your reality as much as it is about actually doing your part to change the world. And in doing so, you do both. So I'm going to share a quote with you that kind of encapsulates this a little bit more. And I love this quote. Suppose that you had the revolution that you're talking and dreaming about. Suppose your side had won. You had the kind of society that you always wanted. How would you live, you personally, in that society today? So I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds, 40 seconds to reflect on this and write down the first thing that comes to mind. What is that society that you wanted? And more importantly, how would you live in that society? What would your day look like today? Just write down the first 2 or 3 things that come to mind. I see Stephanie wrote, hope is much easier when you don't have to listen to the news. It is. It is at times, especially in today's world. And so maybe part of that practice is if the world was great, if you knew everything was working the way that it was working, would you listen to the news like every second of every day? Like waiting for the next piece of bad news or the next update to provide just a little bit of hope? Or would you maybe just check in once a day to see how the world is doing and catch up? I see Stuart wrote empathy. So sometimes I imagine it can be hard in today's world to really let yourself be fully empathetic towards others for fear and mistrust, that maybe others don't have the same values as you or aren't as morally upstanding as you, or just that fear to be vulnerable, respectful. And in putting that out into the world, we attract more of it back to us as well. You signal to people that that's what you value, and they learn to communicate with you like that. And then you also find other people who value those things intrinsically by communicating that way. Now, of course, there's a head fake to this quote. I didn't give you the full quote. The full quote actually goes like this: start living that way now. So you have at least a few things on your list. I would challenge each of you to go out and just fully embrace what you wrote down for today. And then try again next week and see how it feels. Change the list if you want as well. So we're going to get into the final poll now. I'm going to ask Sarah to pop it up, and this one's for our psychological well-being. Beautiful. So again, same question. In the past month, how often have you felt that you have warm and trusting relationships with other people, that you're satisfied with most parts of your personality, that you're good at managing the responsibilities of day-to-day life, that you have experiences that challenge you to grow and become a better person. You're confident to think or express your ideas and opinions most of the time. Most of the time is important because we're never all fully confident 100% of the time. And that your life has a sense of direction or meaning. All right, we'll give everyone just a couple more seconds to finish the poll. All right, and so we're going to close up the poll now, and I'll share the results once again. So it looks like some of these we actually do quite well, which is interesting. So when we talk about our social well-being, where a lot more of us struggled, it's not with those close relationships, like most of us have those, it looks like, but it's really about that connection with the community and the world, which takes a lot more deliberate effort and practice during COVID times. And I think what I see kind of has the most requests on it is this idea of my life has a sense of direction or meaning to it, which is really tricky. So this one, there's a lot of very deep exercises that we can get into with this around like vision setting and purpose setting, but I'm going to start right at the beginning. There we go. With another quote. The great secret of getting what you want from life is to know what you want and believe you can have it, which sounds a little glib when you say, I don't know what I want with my life, and someone says, well, just figure it out. But it really does start with that. It starts with that deep sense of knowing and then a true belief that you can have it. Because we don't have time to dive into everything today, I'm going to start with the foundational building block, which is a really simple question that I pull from an evidence-based mental health therapy called ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, which is who and what is most important to you. This is talking about our values, and values are different than goals. When we think about where we want to be, our sense of meaning and purpose, we often jump straight to goals. So as I'm talking, you can reflect a little bit on who and what is most important to you. The reason we jump straight to goals is because it's like, I want a big house, I want a nice car, or even something less material, like I want to spend one day a week volunteering. But values involve ongoing action. They're like directions. And we keep moving towards those values. We keep acting in alignment with those values. But we never actually reach them. Whereas goals are things that we just want to achieve along the way of acting in towards those values. So think of values like heading west. A goal would be to cross the river or the mountain or the valley to like overcome the life obstacle to reach a checkpoint. But your value is like a direction. So goals can be achieved, they can be crossed off, whereas values never end. So if you really connect with your values, the who and the what that's most important to you, that can be an ongoing compass for you to give you that sense of direction, that sense of meaning and purpose, even when you don't know exactly what your goals are. it also actually helps in figuring out what your next goal should be, because you know that you're going that way, and you know that you can look that way and say, okay, what are some things on the horizon there that I could work towards in work and education, in your personal relationships, in your learning and growth, in your leisure time. So this actually is a full exercise that I'm going to give you a preview of later, but the first step is always to identify who and what is most important to you. So for our last about 9-10 minutes together, I'm going to give you a preview of some of my favorite tips and tricks for COVID, as well as my favorite tools for when you're having kind of like a lower day. So quickly, I'm sure some of you have seen this. You are not working from home. You are at home during a crisis trying to work. It's important to remember this. And so when we think about the pros and cons of working from home, it's great because I get to wake up at like 8:55 and make myself a coffee and keep my pajama bottoms on. Not today, but often. But it's also kind of crappy because I wake up, I go to work, I finish work, I still have my pajamas on, and then I go to sleep. That doesn't provide for a very engaging day, and that's just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg, because there's also a lot of different stressors that come from working at home in general and working from home in the middle of a crisis. So my top tips for everyone, and these are 3 tried and true things that were as true at the beginning of the pandemic when we first started talking about this, as they are now, is 1, keep a consistent schedule, sticking to consistent like wake times, taking the physical health breaks, is really, really important, because it actually gives you that structure to your day so that you can break up work time from home time and make sure that you're doing the things that keep yourself healthy. Connect with your purpose. So we talked a little bit about this already, but especially once you know your values, doing one thing that actively engages them each day will make you feel just a little bit better. It'll make you feel a little bit lighter, and also give you that sense of like, this is why I need to wake up today. Like, this is why I need to get out of bed and be productive, because there are things worth doing even if I'm stuck at home. And then finally, learn acceptance. So we're going to touch on this in a second as well. But one of the most powerful things you can do to overcome the things that really are challenging you is to accept what's outside of your control, and then start to work through it. Awesome. I'm not sure, Stephanie, what your background is, but it's so great to have you here, and I'm sure you'd be a valuable resource to people here in the chat, so thank you for sharing. And if you ever want to talk after and swap notes, I think that'd be really cool. All right, so part 2, really quickly. This is kind of like the crash course on some of my favorite mental health skills that you can bring home and kind of work with yourself. I'm pulling from, so nowadays, the world of behavior therapy is really popular. I'm sure some people have heard of CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy. There are many other forms of behavior therapy that kind of take a back seat because they just don't have as good a press agent. They just haven't been popularized in the same way, but are also very powerful complements. So I'm going to walk you through one skill from each. And if you like what you hear and you want to learn more, of course, please reach out, because this is just like the very tip of the iceberg. So first, we're going to dive into CBT for the self-critic. So CBT tells us that to think of kind of like our life events, the way things that happen to us and unfold for us in this ABC context. We start with some activating event. Something happens in our world around us, in our environment. That event is neither good nor bad. It's totally neutral. If we weren't here, no one would even notice. But we are here, and we then have to interpret it. So our beliefs, our way of seeing the world, is what helps us interpret that event. So for example, I wake up this morning and I make my coffee and it spills all over the table. That event is not intrinsically good or bad. It could just be like a funny thing that happened. But I need my coffee. I also believe in like keeping a tidy house. I also believe that like you need to be slow and deliberate and not make mistakes. And so this really eats me up. I'm really upset by this. And it's my belief that you need to be slow and deliberate and not make mistakes that tells me this is a really bad thing that happened. And then there's consequences, which is how you feel and what you do based on that. So I might get really upset, distraught, and then come into this webinar with all this pent-up anxiousness and not be able to do a good job. Keeping an attitude of gratitude. I love that. I love that. So maybe it's the gratitude that I live in a house and that I can wake up every morning and actually brew my coffee. It's the little things as well as the big things. And gratitude is a very powerful thing to do each day. I want to pause though, briefly think of a time that you were worried, when you were worried about something, and the thing that you were worried about, the worry itself was way worse than the reality of it. I'm sure many of us are like, yep, I got something. I'm sure others of us are like, yeah, I have a friend who did that yesterday. When you're in one of those situations where the worry about the situation is far worse than the situation itself, check the facts. What happened? So you write down what happened. What was that activating event, the thing in the real world that's neither good nor bad? And then what were your automatic thoughts? For example, I'm going through this webinar and I'm not seeing that many comments. That's because you're here to watch a webinar. But I may be thinking, oh my God, they hate this presentation. And then next, list the evidence for and against. So what is the evidence for that assumption? Oh my God, they hate this presentation. Maybe it's I don't see that many comments. And then what's the evidence against? Wait, earlier in the presentation, you guys all told me how you were feeling and it was great and we had a great dialogue. Oh, this is a perfect example from Mary. And it's like a very real one that I'm sure many of us can relate to. And so then the next thing that Mary would have to do, oh, sorry, this is just to the panelists, that's my bad. But the example that I saw was my manager messaged me. I had automatic thoughts of what have I done wrong and that feeling of dread and fear. So then we'd have to look at the evidence for and against, and then we'd have to think of alternative fair thoughts based on the evidence against. So what else could be true? In my back to the webinar example, it could be that everyone's here just watching and listening and taking notes, and you want to come up with a few alternatives. We'll have a few minutes for questions at the end, so if you have questions about any of this, save it, and you can pop them in the Q&A. The next skill that I want to talk about really briefly is DBT. This is my favorite modality, my favorite form of mental health help. DBT for stressful times. The reason it's my favorite is, unlike a lot of other therapies like CBT, DBT focuses on both acceptance and change. And so the change piece is there in a lot of therapies, and CBT is very change focused. But what's fairly unique about DBT is it has a grounding in acceptance work as well. So I'm going to accept where my situation is. I'm going to tap into my mindfulness to be actually aware fully of the situation and how I feel and my emotions. And then I'm going to use Dbt skills to change it as well when I can. So I'm going to ask everyone to think of a time where the world around you seemed stressful or distressing. Try and be specific with it. So not just looking outside right now, but a specific situation you found yourself in when the world around you, your environment, was stressful and distressing. Maybe it looked something like this, or felt like this at the very least. So I'm going to walk you through 3 different DBT skills from the distress tolerance, so getting through tough times module, and from the emotion regulation module, which is helping me to work with my emotions to use them when they're most effective, as opposed to letting them get in the way. First one is something called Name It to Tame It. When you're feeling angry or stressed or sad or anxious, actually name what you're feeling. Reflect, and then say to yourself, or even out loud if it's appropriate, like in the space that you're in, I am feeling stressed. I am feeling tired. 2 notes. One is, it's always I am feeling, or I notice I am feeling, or I am experiencing. Never I am, because you are not your emotions. Your emotions are just something that occurs in your brain and that help guide your life. They're a way of thinking and interpreting the world. And so I am feeling blank. The reason this is so powerful is not only does it actually give you a little bit more context, but it also, there's like a neurobiological process where it moves your thinking from your emotional center of your brain, which is more reactive, to your judgment center of your brain, which processes language, which gives you a little bit more calm and clarity, or it can then help you choose to act in a different way. The next piece is radical acceptance. And so this is accepting a situation we don't like in order to change our experience. And so this is in the moment. This is not to say that if you're in a bad situation to accept it perpetually, but to say in that moment. So let's say you wake up and you have back-to-back meetings from 9 to 5, and by 2 p.m. you are just feeling gross and garbage, and you're so upset at the fact that you have to sit in this chair for like 6-8 hours straight with hardly any breaks, and you can't control it, you can't change it. By radically accepting it, you can then start to move forward and look towards how you're going to deal with that situation coming out of it. So by saying, I accept that I have these meetings for the next 8 hours, or even I accept that that I'm scared for one of my loved ones who's more vulnerable. By accepting that, then you can start asking, okay, now what can I do about it? And again, this is just like the very sparks notes, so we can dive more into it in the app or at a separate time. And then finally, if you're feeling overcome by an emotion that's probably going to lead you to do something that you know you shouldn't really do, like you're feeling really stressed and you want to just binge eat a bag of chips, or you're feeling really sad and you want to just shut yourself off from the rest of the world, which ultimately is going to make you feel worse. There's a skill called opposite action, which sounds really intuitive, but figure out what that unproductive urge is, that eating a bag of chips, that shutting yourself off from the rest of the world, and literally just push yourself, commit to doing the opposite. It's hard, but as you start to practice it, it actually becomes much easier. And the reason that's so powerful is because in those moments when we're feeling really low, it's often hard to know what the right thing to do is, and even harder to do it. But by simply asking, okay, what is that urge to shut myself off from the rest of the world, let's say? Okay, that means I have to call someone that I love and care about. No question, no debate. I care about, like, I want myself to feel better. I'm going to call someone that I care about. And almost always it will push you towards that direction of feeling better. It may not solve everything, but it'll help you go in the right direction. The final thing that we don't have time for today is something called the ACT matrix. This is going to be live, so you can pause the video, come back to it, and fill this out. We started in that values quadrant, and then we walk around the matrix to create kind of like a map for our day or our week. So to the, I saw one comment here about accepting but feeling kind of helpless. This can be a good step in that direction because it helps kind of guide us in those moments of helplessness, of uncertainty or insecurity, of what we, like those feelings exist. They're going to be in the bottom left, and then the things that may pull us in the wrong direction, that may make us feel even more helpless, or may make us feel like even more insecure. Oftentimes it can be a snowball effect. So having written this down gives you a little bit more power and ownership of it. And then having that list of helpful actions, kind of like the positivity reservoir, or like the list of things that make us happy. It can give us like very simple things that we can say, okay, I don't want to do anything. I'm feeling gross. I'm feeling helpless. I can see myself getting hooked and pulled in the direction of feeling that way. Now what can I do instead? Because in the center of this chart is you, and you have the power in any moment to step back from how you're feeling, step back from what you're thinking, and then make a conscious decision about what you're going to do next, which takes work, it takes practice. Therapy is great for that as well. And we have therapy in the Resili app if you're not connected to a therapist already. But this is a really powerful tool. Thank you so much for coming, Stephanie, and I look forward to connecting with you. So final note for everyone, and then we'll save a few minutes for Q&A. The Resili app, it's free. It covers a lot of Dbt skills and has a lot of articles on mental flourishing, which is how we started this talk. So please download it if that's something that you're passionate about or interested in. And now we'll open it up to questions.
Morgan, that was incredible. Let me start by saying first that I am feeling hope, and I will actively visualize hope so that I can boost my social actualization. I love that you talked about that and you addressed, accepting and claiming your feelings. I love how you shared the secret to living the life that you want and determining what it is and going after it. I loved that you talked about mental health flourishing. Let's repeat that, mental health flourishing. The conversation today, or the masterclass, I should say today, I think is just what is needed for so many people during this health crisis. And having you speak and lead meditation to start was a perfect way of starting the day. It was such a delight and surprise to engage in meditation and take it in at the top of this masterclass, and then really center thinking about mental health, mental well-being, and mental health flourishing. So my thanks to you. I would recommend, I'm glad that you've left this slide up so people can see a little bit more about the Resili app. I have the Resili app and I love the interaction that I have with it. I love getting an email each day from Morgan on, a way to approach the day. So for those of you who are considering how you might action some of the learning today or reflect and have gratitude for this experience this morning, I recommend you download the Resili app, and we'll make sure that we send out links to the app, links to accessing through Morgan the Resili Report. I encourage you, if you're a leader or an influencer on this call and you have the option to make change within your workplace, I recommend you give Morgan a call and invite him to join you in your organization for a workshop. I feel like I just delivered a commercial authentically because I feel so passionate already about the content that you've delivered today, Morgan. And I have such gratitude that you were able to join us on what is a very busy day for Bell Let's Talk Day and in your business. So my thanks to you. I encourage anyone who has questions about today's masterclass to connect with Morgan directly. His email has been dropped there in the chat, and of course it'll be circulated in our thank you note to all of our participants. And Morgan, what a pleasure it has been this morning, spending the first hour together. The time flew by. I did a sort of a time check at 9:25 and I thought, oh my gosh, like I could listen all day. So I'm inspired to be thinking about what action I'm going to take at Tech Alliance with our own team. We've had this experience to deliver to our community and now having a bit of an internal approach. So I'm making a commitment to be supporting my own team differently with the tools and experiences that you offer through your company. I'll leave everybody with one last thought. Check in on someone today. Ask if they're okay. Listen and share. And that takes us to the end of it, Morgan. I want to again offer my thanks to you and to everybody on the call. Be well and take good care of yourself and those around you. Thanks so much, Morgan.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today.
You bet. Have a good one.